Welcome to our Women in STEM panel discussion. My name is Grace Simpkins and I'm going to be moderating tonight's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by Woods Hole Sea Grant, where I work, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, or WHOI, and Earthwatch Institute. Woods Hole Sea Grant supports research, education, and extension projects that encourage environmental stewardship, long-term economic development, and responsible use of the nation's coastal and ocean resources. We are committed to building inclusive marine science programs that serve people with unique backgrounds, circumstances, needs, perspectives, and ways of thinking. WHOI is a private, independent, nonprofit corporation dedicated to ocean research, exploration, and education. Research areas span a wide range of topics relating to the ocean and earth science and marine policy, including interdisciplinary work related to the coastal ocean, ocean life, ocean exploration, and climate change. Our last partner is Earthwatch Institute, and they connect people with scientists worldwide to conduct environmental research and empower them with the knowledge they need to conserve the planet. Their teen programs empower students to expand their interest in science and technology and to build confidence through hands-on environmental research. Now, normally, this panel discussion would take place during our residential Girls in Science program in Woods Hole. But due to the pandemic, we had to cancel our 2020 season. We would be sharing dinner and interacting with each of our panelists in person, but we are so happy to be able to host this on a virtual platform with you right now, so that the registrants for the 2020 program, as well as other interested students, can participate. You can even eat your dinner while you listen in if you want. Afterward, please remember to go check out our Woods Hole Sea Grant Girls in Science website to learn more about our 2021 residential program in Woods Hole. Now today, it's my privilege to be introducing you to Laela Sayigh, to Kerry Strom, to Sarai Zalada, Amanda Dwyer, and Jenny Rubin. While we'll be talking about the career paths of these 5 amazing STEM professionals, we want to recognize that we are coming to you from the traditional lands of Native communities who have substantial traditional and local knowledge and much to share with us. We are hosting this webinar from the ancestral lands of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the Wampanoag tribe of Gay-Hedequina. A few guidelines, I'm almost done, I promise. You're all muted. However, there's a box where you can write questions. We encourage you to ask them as we go along, and I'll be keeping track for our speakers. We hope you feel comfortable asking anything. The only person who will see your questions is me. And when I share them, I'll just say your first name. For example, Jennifer asks, da-da-da-da-da. So know that that is confidential. Each speaker will answer a few questions after telling us their career journey. And once all of the speakers have had a chance to tell us their story, we'll ask questions of the whole panel. So if we don't get to yours when we end with a certain speaker, save it and ask it when we're asking questions of the panel. If we don't have time to get to everyone's questions, don't worry. We're going to send a follow-up email with our responses. This is also recorded and will be posted on our Woods Hole Sea Grant website in the upcoming week, so you can take a look if you miss anything. All right, enough of me talking, so I'm going to ask all of our panelists, except for Laela, to please turn off their cameras. Our first speaker, Dr. Laela Sayigh, is a marine mammal acoustic research specialist at WHOI. Laela's research focuses on the social behavior and communication of cetaceans, which are our whales and dolphins. So I am going to hide my screen as well and turn it over to Laela. So it's all yours, Laela.
Okay, well, welcome everyone, and I'm glad you were able to join this webinar tonight. And I'm going to share with you just a little brief sort of history, I guess, of my path to where I am today, which is, I guess, what everybody's going to be doing. And so I figured I would just launch right in and start from when I was a young child, where I actually was always really fascinated by animals. And I spent a lot of my summers here on Cape Cod, where I am now, walking on sandbars and looking in tidal pools, playing with hermit crabs and other marine creatures. And at home, I spent a lot of time watching fish in my fish tank and naming them. And so I just kind of started out being very, very fascinated by animals, and really retained this love and curiosity for animals throughout my life. And skipping fast forward now to college, I studied biology. A highlight of my college career was a marine ecology summer course that I took in Maine, where we collected and identified all sorts of marine creatures, and that really cemented my interest in marine science. So I found animal behavior and ecology to be areas of study that allowed me to combine these interests in animal behavior and marine biology. I remember back in college talking about maybe studying whales, and a couple of my professors said, no, don't do that. There aren't any opportunities to do that. It's too difficult. But I tried anyway, and I'm glad I didn't listen to them. I applied to several marine science graduate programs and was lucky enough to be admitted to the MIT Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution joint program right here, where my advisor named Peter Tyak was working on dolphin communication. And in my very first week of graduate school, I guess you can show the first slide now, Grace. I actually went to Sarasota, Florida that very first week. I don't know if you can see the slides. Oh, or are they coming up? Okay, I'm familiar with this interface, but yeah, okay. So those are some of a younger me for the most part when I was out on a boat in Florida. And so a lot of what we do down there in Florida is work with a resident population of dolphins. That has been the focus of a really long-term study. We actually do annual health assessments where we can briefly handle the animals, and there's lots and lots of research projects that go on down there. And one of them is studying their communication, which was what I was working on back as a graduate student, and actually continue on with that work today. And a lot of my work has focused on individually distinctive signature whistles that dolphins produce. So you can move on to the next slide and show you an example of that. This slide shows a spectrogram or a plot of frequency versus time, which is how we study dolphin whistles. And you can see that's a repetitive pattern, the same shape. And so we that's actually how we study them, really, is by visually identifying those patterns. And we actually did work with these types of spectrograms in the Girls in Science class last year when I was one of the leaders of that program. And we worked with some data that we collected in Wellfleet, Mass, where a lot of mass stranding events occur, where dolphins land on the beach for reasons we don't understand. And we're trying to develop an acoustic alert system for those events. And the girls in the program last year were working on some data from that, and we may well do that again next year too, if any of you are able to join us. So, so then going on to the next slide, the last image is just me working on a computer, and I wanted to mention that that is what I spend most of my time doing. So even though a lot of times it sounds sort of glamorous to work on dolphins and whales, and it is, of course, fun and fantastic to work with them in the field. But I usually tell students that I would say for maybe every couple of weeks that I spend in the field, I would spend probably at least 6 months analyzing data on a computer. And I actually love doing that part of the work. I love doing both parts of the work, but it is a huge part of what I do. So just returning to my brief history then, after I completed grad school, I briefly taught at the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, but then got a job at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, which has a really strong marine science program. And I spent 10 years there doing a lot of field-based work with my students there. And I got tenure there, was sort of settled in that job. I also had my 2 children while we were living in North Carolina, and learned that the challenges of parenting and working at the same time during that period. But eventually my husband found that he didn't really like living in the South, so he wanted to return to Woods Hole, and we both got jobs at WHOI, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and have been living here in Woods Hole for the past 15 years. And since I've come into Woods Hole, I've really broadened the research areas that I've been involved in, working on communication in a variety of different species like blue whales, pilot whales, and different dolphin species. And a few years ago, I also began working part-time at Hampshire College out in Western Mass. So I really missed the interactions with undergrads that I had at UNCW. So now I kind of split my time between WHOI and Hampshire. Although due to COVID right now, I actually do all of my work from home, as pretty much most people are. So anyway, but I think that's all I have, and I'd be glad to answer questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Laela. We do have a few questions that came in, and if you have a question for Laela, please type it in because I'll be monitoring that while she answers this. Now, the first question for you comes from Jessica, and she is wondering, what is a piece of advice for a woman wanting to earn her PhD in marine biology? What piece of advice would you offer?
Okay. That's a great question. I think there's a lot of different things I could answer to that. I guess I know from my own experience, one thing that I wish I had done more of was learning like computer-based skills like computer programming. Not obviously I'm not talking about being a computer programming major or computer science major. I mean, you can major in marine biology, but to try to make an effort to gain that skill set, I think you would find it really opens just a lot of doors in how you can work with data and you can kind of do a lot of things that are just harder to do maybe if you don't have that skill set. So yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next question we have comes from Colleen, and she asks, what do you like most about your career?
Wow, I guess I love a lot of different things. I really love working. So I've had the most, maybe I'm not allowed to say more than one thing, but I love the science. I literally, if I have a day where I can work on data, I feel like I'm going to a party. I mean, I really love it. But I also absolutely love working with students. Like to me, that's just, it's been so exciting to be working at Hampshire and last year working with the girls in the Girls in Science program. I just love that because I love seeing a new generation of people getting excited by science. So I guess those are the two things I love the most.
Great. I have one more question for you before we move on to our next speaker, and this comes from Ingrid. And she asks, what helped you to realize you wanted to go into the research side of science?
That's a great question too. I did, I don't even really remember necessarily it being so much of like a decision where I was sort of choosing between different things. It was more that in college, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to do research. It was actually in that field course that I mentioned where I went to Maine and I just loved it, so that's when I just found like, okay, this is so fantastic. And if I could actually do this as my job, this would be great. So I think from that perspective, I don't know if anything else. Yeah, the sort of more applied side of things, I never really got a chance to try that kind of stuff because I just sort of got on this path pretty early.
Great. Well, thank you for all your responses. We will see you again, Laela, at the end. But at this point, I'm going to ask you to hide your camera, please. And if Kerry could join us, Kerry will be our next speaker. And just to give you a little introduction to Kerry Strom, she's the Marine Operations Coordinator at WHOI, or as Laela said, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. So Kerry is the schedule planner for the ROV Atlantis, the Armstrong, the HOV Alvin, the ROV Jason, and the AUV Sentry, and soon to be the ROV Resolution. So Kerry is also WHOI's U.S. State Department liaison for marine scientific research applications. So I have to say, Kerry, you wear a lot of different hats. So we're excited, I think, to hear all about them. So again, I'm going to hide my screen. I just want to encourage folks, please write questions for Kerry as we're going along, and then I'll ask her at the end. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Kerry.
Great. Thank you, Grace. Thank you very much. You are appropriately named. And thank you for inviting me, and thanks to WHOI and Woods Hole Sea Grants and Earthwatch for this opportunity to be with everybody tonight. I'm really happy to be here. I'm probably the only person on this panel that is not in STEM, but I'm serving your community. So I'm an administrator for you, basically. And my path here was not straight at all, which I think is probably why Grace thinks it's funny to have me on. I knew when I was growing up that I loved the sea. I also loved art as a kid. And I was very fortunate to have a dad and an uncle who very much loved the sea. And so I fished with my dad, and my dad and my uncle had 2 sailing schools in Florida, one in Sarasota, where Laela started her career, and the other was in Tampa. So as a young child, I was free labor for the family, and I loved it. So I've always been around water, grew up sailing, swimming, fishing, rowing later on, and painting the sea. So that was kind of my childhood and what influenced me. So when it came to choose a career and kind of choose a school, I really wanted to go to the Maritime Academy. I lived on Long Island. I'm from New York. And there was the Federal Maritime Academy there, Kings Point. And my dad used to drive me and my friends there for all the dances that they had at the academy. And I think his thought was, maybe I'll get married to one of these officers or something. But actually, when it came time to pick a school, I said, I want to actually go to that academy. And unfortunately, his view on that was, no daughter of mine is going to take a paycheck away from a man feeding his family, so pick something else. And they had a lot of power in that statement because I was paying for half of my undergrad and my parents were paying for the other half. So I kind of had to step in line because I couldn't afford it on my own. So I chose art. I did fine art and graphic design at the University of Buffalo, and all state schools, by the way, because that's what we could afford. And when I graduated, I worked at, no surprise, the South Street Seaport Museum because I love the sea, but I found myself spending more time outside volunteering on the schooners than I did in the art studio. And it was also a very poor existence. I was getting $8 an hour, no health insurance or benefits. So I knew that I had to have a change. So after a year, I took time off. And when you're not making money, I lived with a family and was a nanny for that year. So again, hard left, hard right. No straight path there. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to take out a loan. And I was still working on the fishing boats at the time, which is how I earned my undergrad half. And then I went to the Maritime Academy for the master's program and also the third officer's program. And my goal was to be a sea pilot because you could still, you didn't have to go away for 4 months at a time. You could go home, be home every night with your family. And that was, I wanted a family. So that was my goal. I wanted to be on ships and still be here. So that's around when I turned 27 when I finished all of this. I did get into the pilots, but I timed out because you can't be older than 27. And when I had when I had finished with maritime, I was almost 27. So I had a year, but I did get in the top 10. I would have been the first woman. And basically that's the type of job where you would have to die or retire before someone else moves into it. But I was happy to have accomplished that. And after that, I worked, and I'll show you some pictures later. Grace has a little collage. I went into shipping in New York, working 70 hours a week, and I was mostly working for Scandinavian companies. So when I started to get to know the captains and the management working with these companies, I really liked the culture. You could even see it on the ships when they would come in, totally different from maybe a scrap metal ship or a sugar ship or something, just a totally different culture. And when the opportunity arose for me to go to Sweden from New York. I worked over there in Stockholm for 2 years, and then in Norway for 7. So I've had really good, like an amazing stroke of luck to be able to work with these Scandinavian companies. And any advancements I've made along my career, I attribute to my management and the culture there, because they do lift women up. They empower, the senior management always empowers the people under them. There's a respect from top to bottom. There's, you know, it's not like the US Japanese culture of hierarchy. So that was a wonderful opportunity, and it's where I went from working 70 hours a week in New York to, you know, 35, 40 hour the most work week in Scandinavia. And, you know, I work to live now, not live to work. And I like to share what I know, which is what I learned there. And I try to lift up the folks around me that I work with. That is extremely fulfilling. I kind of would like to leave you with 3 thoughts or bits of advice. The first story is a moment that I had in Sweden with my dad. As you know, he didn't want me to go into this career. And it was a 7-year detour, and that costs quite a bit. But, you know, I took him, I remember he came to visit me in Sweden. I had bought a house there by myself, you know, and was on the company boat, took him out to dinner. And he told me he was super proud of me, and that was at age 30. So I was really happy to hear that. But at the same time, it wasn't the trophy that I thought it would be. And I just wished I had listened to that voice, you know, because I so much wanted to please my parents at the time, and, you know, was constrained by funds. But I really wish I had stood my ground and followed my heart. So I would just say, try to make life decisions by following your heart, and it'll cost you if you don't. So that's, I think, really important. And it might be hard, and I'm sure it would have been hard for me if I had gone the other way. But time not wasted either. 2, network, build friendships, personal connections. It's so easy in this day and age to do that. I think please count me among your resources. Connect with me at WHOI. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's any way I could help you, I will. And third, I would say, you know, here we are in COVID times. And in my career, I think I learned the most when in adversity. So, you know, I've been involved in ship sinkings, collisions. I had a ship arrested, oil spills, deaths on board. So stuff that you don't want to have to do when you're at work, but when you encounter these setbacks, you learn an awful lot. And I would say the same is true for today. You know, I'm really proud of the people at Woods Hole Oceanographic, the ship ops team. Just amazing what they're doing to keep scientists safe. We basically created the gold standard for continuing to go out to sea during COVID times. And, you know, there's setbacks, but we're learning a lot, and, you know, we'll use it to our advantage. So I think try to see this as an opportunity to be more creative and disciplined than before, and use this adversity to your advantage. You'll get through it, and you'll be stronger for it. I don't know if you want to put up the pictures now, Grace, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I didn't grow up in the selfie age or a phone with a smartphone. So whatever pictures you see here are my days working for the pilots. That's me on the QE2 when I first got out of school, and me on the bridges of a couple of really cool ships, the QE2, and this is the ship that made the transatlantic record. If you can go to the next picture. Yeah. This is me and an Indian captain that always told me that I had to be married off. So I always thought he was really funny. So what did he say? I was I don't know, there's a name for it, but I thought he was very funny. He didn't think I should be in shipping either. Here's me at the Maritime Academy in the goofy suits, but no one is in a more goofy suit than the guards at the Vatican, where we got to meet the Pope. And then here's me working on the fishing boats as I think I was 15 at the time. And I don't know if I think I have a couple seismic, because when I worked offshore for the Scandinavian companies, yeah, here's a Scandinavian captain that was quite the character. I'm sure you can tell just by looking at him. Here's me. I used to go to work in a helicopter for 5 years when I worked offshore for seismic, worked with, for the first time, scientists, geologists, offshore for oil and gas, and this is us landing. And this is me approaching the vessel, and as you can see, it's far away, but it's like a 1/4 mile wide rig, and it goes back 8 miles. So I'm happy to say that I steered that thing, and nothing ever happened bad. I don't think there's any more pictures. Are there, Grace? Oh, yep. Okay. And then here's what this is how we're steering the ship. We had about 12 monitors and no windows in this room, by the way. And this is the ship from afar with the helideck and everything. We're just picking up anchor. And this is kind of what it was a 5-star operation. The oil companies could afford it. So the cost of this ship per day was $500,000 a day to do their research. And just to give you an idea, the most expensive ship in the UNOL's fleet is like $48,000 a day. So that's it. And I think there's one more picture. I think it's like a stateroom or something like that. What the staterooms on board look like.
That's all I've got for pictures. I don't think yeah.
That's enough. Thanks.
I actually was going to stop you. I told all of the presenters that I'm going to be on the stopwatch. So thank you so much for that. And I feel like I need to refute your statement that you're not a STEM professional, because I would argue that you are a STEM professional, and you just told us in how many different ways you work with all the different fields. So I think you're underselling yourself. But I have a couple of quick questions because we are a little bit over on time. So let's see. Sarah asks, what happened? You mentioned a ship sinking and someone getting arrested. She wonders what happened with that ship sinking.
Yep. So those two situations were related. We had a Russian ship hit our Norwegian ship in the English Channel. It sank. And then the people who owned the cargo on board tried to arrest our other ship to use as collateral. And that's very often in lawsuits and whatnot. They do stuff like that.
Thank you. And Ingrid asks, do you incorporate your art into your current job at HOV at all?
Yes and no. I work a lot. I volunteer at a lot of events at HOV and help out in that way when I can. But I do a lot of the captains that I sailed with. I did portraits of their grandchildren or their wives or something. So yes and no, but not to so much of an extent. But HOV's actually going through a rebranding process, and I was fortunately on that small group that they asked for feedback, which I really appreciated. So. Yeah.
Great. Well, there are some more questions, but I'm going to hold off just in the interest of time, and we'll wait till we have the panel discussion. But thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing all of that. If you could turn your screen off, and then I'm going to ask that Sayigh turn her camera on while I do her introduction. So Sayigh is currently pursuing a master's degree in city planning at the University of Michigan. And as an urban planner, she wants to enhance the experiences of underrepresented communities. She believes city planning is a tool for social change, and she looks to dismantle systems of racial inequity in the built environment. Her career has provided her with unique opportunities, from studying the tropical rainforests of Costa Rica to working with sea turtles off the coast of Texas. As a woman of color, Sayigh has often felt underrepresented in her field and has worked towards promoting equitable and inclusive spaces where everyone can thrive. And I should also mention that Sayigh was one of the leaders of the Girls in Science program last year in 2019, in addition to Laela. So without saying any more and giving away any more of your secrets, I'm going to turn it over to Sayigh.
Thanks, Grace.
You're welcome. I'll be gone in just a second.
No worries. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarai. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to share my experience, not only as a woman in STEM, but a woman of color in STEM. I think we often live in a society where as women we're told we're not enough, and especially as women of color we're told that we don't belong. And so being at the intersection of those two identities can sometimes be difficult. So throughout, my schooling and into my career in STEM, I have often faced barriers and biases associated with not only my gender, but also my race. And so I've had to do a lot of work to sort of battle this in order to be taken seriously and sometimes to just be considered equal. For me, growing up, I didn't have much exposure to STEM. I grew up in a racially diverse community, but as far as class, it was very much a working class community. And my parents, along with other parents in my community, were immigrants. So as I was growing up, they were also just still learning how to live in this country, learning to navigate a new culture. And there was just things that they didn't know. There was just knowledge that they simply couldn't share with me. So that often meant that sometimes I had to figure out things on my own. And so for me, college was one of those things I had to figure out on my own. I had very little guidance when it came to choosing a career, building a career. And as far as schooling, my primary schooling, I attended, I would say, predominantly underfunded public schools, where the curriculum never really taught about people that looked like me. I never read about, names that reminded me of my family's names. So I would say those are some of like the earlier barriers I faced, really teachers not having the necessary tools, teachers and also leadership just lacking of understanding of what it means to be a person of my identity, of my background, of my life experiences. And in that way, their teaching methods not really tailored to people with my identities and in my community. So really not culturally competent, not relevant, and just not interesting. And I also really lacked role models in STEM. There was very little examples of women of color in STEM, and I don't think that's because they didn't exist. I think it's because women of color in STEM don't always get the recognition that they deserve and are not always visible in leadership positions. So I went to college at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and I started off as an environmental engineering major, which was a very white male-dominated field. And I quickly learned that environmental engineering students, or engineering students in general, tend to do homework and study in groups. And oftentimes I was not really invited into those groups. And the times that I did find myself into those spaces, I felt really weird. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't smart enough to be doing what I was doing. And I wasn't doing very well in that field. But ultimately, I felt like I didn't really have much interest in it, and I didn't really like it. And I felt sort of like I was failing, but I decided to give something else, a try. And so I kind of just stumbled into the environmental sciences department and found, a professor and started having conversations of what that field is like. And I was really interested in it. It was something that was still new to me. Growing up, I didn't have too much experience hiking or camping or being in the outdoors or in nature. So the field really exposed me to that and gave me a lot of opportunities to just be outside. I had a course where I was studying trees, and I also got to conduct field studies on sustainable development in Costa Rica. I worked alongside rangers in an internship in Texas. And I realized that I was really passionate about this field, and I really enjoyed it. And I realized I was really happy doing this, taking the courses, learning about the different topics. And my happiness was really important to me at that time. So in retrospect, I don't really think I ever wanted to be an engineer. I just think in my mind, being an engineer was being successful. And so I really had to sort of redefine that definition of success to find something that I was really passionate about, something that I really enjoyed, and sort of add that to my definition of success. After college, I explored a couple of different careers. I had a lot of seasonal, not completely sustainable jobs. So I did a year of AmeriCorps where I worked doing environmental work on Cape Cod. I did some urban farming work, and I worked with sea turtles off the coast of Texas, which I really loved and enjoyed. But like I said, that was really not sustainable, and for reasons not associated with my career, I really needed to be close to my family. At the time, my sister was sick, and I really needed to be back home. But throughout all those jobs, I face issues that are commonly faced by women of color in STEM professions. And I guess the biggest one is really isolation. So often being the only one, I was the only woman of color in the room. And that really made it hard to find role models, because as a woman of color, my road would look differently than like a white woman's road. So I had to really do work to look for my own role models. I had to network, and ultimately I had to really learn how to take care of myself, like my body and my mind. They say like self-care is so important, but for me it really was at that point. I really needed to be happy, because taking care of myself and being happy was helping me become more successful. And it's what I needed to continue in those spaces that aren't always welcoming. So when I found out that there was an opportunity to work with the Girls in Science program at Earthwatch, I really wanted to be involved in that, because I really believe that everyone should be allowed to participate in STEM and allowed the space to enter as a whole person and not fit into some box that someone made up to define what success is. Pretty much throughout my journey, I've learned a lot of things, but I've also had to unlearn a lot of things and stay grounded in my own definition of success and happiness and quality of life, and not let my personal goals be driven or defined by others. So now, as I'm embarking on a new journey, I'm really excited. I finally found a way to connect my experience in the environmental sciences with my community. So I'm starting graduate studies at the University of Michigan, and I'm what some people would call a non-traditional student, because it's been about 7 years since I graduated with my undergraduate degree. And so it kind of took me a long way to figure out what I wanted to do, but I figured it out, and I'm excited, and I'm not done. So I guess my piece of advice to everyone interested in a career in STEM would just be to strive to be successful in your own definition of what that means, and to find work that is meaningful and relevant to you.
I'm going to share your pictures quick, Sarai, because I think they're very interesting to show your experiences. And thank you so much for sharing so many amazing insights into your journey. I don't know if you want to say a quick word about these pictures before we go into the questions.
Yeah, so the first one is me on an ATV. I used to do 8-hour shifts looking for, dead turtles, turtle nest when I was on an island off the coast of Texas, and that was very difficult but very rewarding work. The next one is a work trip to Brazil that I went with Earthwatch, and the one next to that is actually Mexico City, where I did a lot of work with research scientists doing green infrastructure research in Mexico City. The next one is just me doing some, urban farming work. The next one is the Atlantic forest in Brazil, which was just beautiful and amazing, and so happy I got to experience that. I actually was there in January, so before the pandemic, so it was a really, really rewarding place to be before everything kind of, shut down. The one next to it is just me in Costa Rica, so that was in college, and then the one over is when I was doing work in Cape Cod, and then the last one is just some baby turtles that I worked with in Texas.
Great, thank you. I've been eager to hear what all those pictures were from. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to say thank you again. I know that everybody's story is very personal, so I really appreciate hearing everybody's story, and the fact that you are able to share your journey with us, I think is really good for us to hear. So thank you for that. So we got some really great questions, and it's really tiny on my screen, so I'm going to get really close to you all. Sorry. So Ingrid asks, how can a white person that plans to go into STEM like myself, what can a white person do to specifically support my peers of color? Or what do you wish your white peers did or would do to support you on your path? I'm trying to learn how to use my white privilege for good.
Yeah, I think that is a very relevant question, and there's a lot of things to, like I said, learn and unlearn. But I think my #1 piece of advice is to listen to your peers of color and try to like uplift their voices in whatever way you can. Oftentimes, you know, as women or as women of color, we say something and it's not validated until someone else in a higher position or a man says it, you know. So just really listening to what people have to say and their experiences, which might be different from yours.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Bailey. What motivated you to continue pursuing a STEM career once environmental engineering didn't work out?
I was just really interested in what environmental sciences was. Like I didn't really know there was like a career to be made out of that. And so as I really talked to this professor and the more I, you know, took classes in that field, I was like, this is amazing. I love it. I'm so interested in it. It doesn't even feel like I'm studying. It's like I'm doing what I love.
Nice. I think that goes along with Kerry's listen to your heart, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay, so there are some great questions. I'm going to go with one more just in the interest of time, and then I'll save some of them for the panel discussion. But Abby asks, being of a mixed race, what obstacles might I face going into STEM, and how can I overcome them? And I think that I'm going to fold into that what Nirali asked was, you mentioned self-care. You know, sort of what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's just finding moments of peace and joy for yourself. I think sometimes when we're, you know, whether you're in school or in a profession, it takes a lot out of you sometimes. And so, you know, just as a professional in the field, and I think being a woman of color just adds that because you're also dealing with the gender issues and racial issues and all the other intersections of all the other identities you carry. And that's not siloed in the workplace. You know, sometimes you face those things in the workplace and sometimes you face them on your way home, on your way to work. You know, like I've experienced, you know, on a work trip, preparing for it, I was buying stuff actually last year for WHOI, you know, and I had an experience where someone was explicitly racist to me, you know, and that's hard when you're here like trying to do this good work and trying to talk about how, you know, diversity and inclusion is awesome and great, and then you have to experience that like as you're working. So yeah, I would say it's part of, you know, everything. You can't take that off, you know, and it follows you into workplace and it follows you in other places. So you really have to just find time for yourself, to validate yourself, to make yourself feel like you're worthy of, you know, occupying the space that you're in.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insights. Like I said, we do have more questions. Don't worry. I'm going to save some of those for when we do the panel discussion, just in the interest of time. But I appreciate hearing your story, Sayigh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Sayigh to hide her camera or turn it off, please. And if Amanda could join us while I give her intro. So Amanda Dwyer is a Knaus Fellow with the NOAA Marine Debris Program. Amanda's graduate research focused on coral physiology in response to bleaching events. After graduating just in December, she started a Marine Science Policy Fellowship to learn more about the interface between science and policy. Her current role is focused on implementing a zero waste initiative for NOAA's National Ocean Service and providing additional support to the Marine Debris Program. So again, enough of me talking. I'm going to turn my camera off and turn it over to Amanda.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks everyone. It's been really great to hear your stories and appreciate hearing other people's perspectives and journeys as well. I'll go ahead and start with my photos if that's okay, Grace. But I just kind of want to highlight the overall, my overall journey. I'll start out with highlighting. So I grew up in Nebraska, So in the middle of the country, not near an ocean at all, but I still was able to study corals, which was is something that has been really interesting to me while I was growing up in Nebraska. And then moving off of coral reefs, as Grace said, I am now working more of a focus on marine debris during my current fellowship. And so I want to kind of share the different paths that led me through each of these stages. So growing up in Nebraska, what really hooked my interest was just, I had an amazing first grade teacher. And when we learned about coral reefs, we built a coral reef out of arts and crafts in our classroom. And it really just stuck with me. I think something so unique and so beautiful and so delicate that I couldn't see being in Nebraska really made me want to just learn everything I could about it. And so that made me, when we're doing projects where you can choose what your topic is, I just would usually pick a coral reef and continue learning about it. When I wanted to go to college, I was interested in marine biology, but I wasn't really ready to move to the coast, being 18, and I wanted to still be a little close to my family. So I went to college at a small liberal arts school in Wisconsin, where I knew there were some professors who did marine biology studies and a lot of aquatic ecology. And so one of the benefits of going to a smaller liberal arts school was I was able to work really closely with my advisor and get a lot of different experiences. I did research with him in the summers during college on Green Bay and Wisconsin, and I got to travel with him on a grant that he got to do similar research in the Baltic Sea. Which led to my introduction to copepods, which are a tiny, tiny living organism. They're zooplankton that live in almost any aquatic system, and that's what my research focused on in undergrad. I also got to do sea semester, where I was sailing on a ship and lived on a ship for a month, which taught me not only a lot about science, but a lot about my own personal abilities and overcoming seasickness and learning how to sail a ship while doing science. And then I also participated in an organization called Kids Give at my university and did some research and some community work with schools in Sierra Leone. And during this time, all of these experiences really gave me a lot of opportunities, even though I knew I was interested in coral, to really help build my background and gain some other interests. And then finally, I was able to travel to a coral reef for the first time my junior year of college to do some research with the professor and got to dive on a coral reef. And I really was hooked, and I knew this was what I wanted to continue working on. But these other experiences still really informed a lot of what I did throughout my grad school and what I'm doing now. So my PhD research actually focused on copepods and zooplankton on coral reefs. So Grace, I think you can go to the next slide. So yes, so I also have a photo of a computer because my graduate work, part of it, I was really lucky. I did a lot of scuba diving to collect my research, but then the other side of that, so you can see I'm scuba diving there with my dive buddy, and we're swimming with a big plankton net and collecting plankton right off the coral reef. But then the flip side of all that, the time I got to spend underwater, I also spent hundreds of hours on the microscope then analyzing and characterizing the plankton that I collected. And so I also wanted to just highlight there's a lot of different, can be a lot of variety in the science that you choose, and some parts are more fun than others. And so my research really focused on plankton, plankton's ability, or how much plankton is available. Does that matter for how a coral is going to recover from being stressed? And so that's kind of the big picture of my research. But what I learned, in addition to enjoying the field work and enjoying asking the research questions and finding the answers and thinking of new questions, I really enjoyed sharing what I was working on and sharing the science with other people. So while I was doing all my field work, which I did down in Panama at the Smithsonian Research Institute, I got to work with school groups and I got to work with tourists who came on the Smithsonian tours. And I really enjoyed having the opportunity to, in both English and Spanish, be able to communicate what I was working on. And it's really rewarding when someone would ask a question that they, you could tell they were really thinking about it and learning from what I was saying. And then when I came back to Boston, which is where I did my graduate school at Northeastern University, I was involved in our outreach program there as well. So in Boston, there aren't any corals nearby, but we did have a small tank with a few corals. And so I really enjoyed the outreach opportunities there as well. And Grace, if you want to do the next photo. But I also was really involved in a program called the Beach Sisters, which is a program through Girls Inc. of Lynn, so a place for girls to go after school, and with our Marine Science Center. And I worked with 5 high school girls during one of their sessions during grad school, and I asked them, we learned what do they care about. They're learning about the environment. We teach marine science lessons, and they teach them to younger girls, and we have conversations about what they see in their area and in their town and their community. And one of the things they noticed was there's just a lot of litter, and that was concerning to them because they're in a coastal community and they wanted to do something about it. So I worked with them to think about what we could do, and they realized a lot of towns around them were passing a plastic bag ban to help decrease litter, as plastic bags are one of the main items that they saw. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me because I was looking at it from an environmental perspective, but this was in an environmental justice community, and we learned a lot about some of the other things to consider. And so we were really lucky that we were able to partner with WHOI and MIT Sea Grant to have the girls create reusable bags. So they designed these bags with their logo and the Sea Grant logos, and they put some information about why using this reusable bag is important. And we were able to distribute those throughout the community to help make sure people could have this resource if there were no longer going to be single-use plastic bags available to them. And in addition, we worked with some of the middle school girls in the Beach Sisters program to create storm drain art, as pictured here. And this was to help raise awareness within the community that when you're litter in the street, it's going to go right into the ocean because the ocean's just less than a mile away from these locations. And so working in this community and sharing this side of the science really got me interested in marine debris, and it got me interested also just in general how to learn more about how science is applied to policy and behavior change. And so getting some experience looking at the local level, and we also did a little work at the state level at Massachusetts. I was interested in the Canals Marine Science Policy Fellowship, which is you get 1 year in DC to work on marine science policy in a government agency. So I was really fortunate to be placed in the marine debris program at NOAA, where I'm helping to implement a zero waste initiative within their office. And so that means that they have some actions that they want to do to look at how they could reduce some of the waste that they produce in the office to make sure that they're walking the walk and setting a good example as well. And so that's been a really great experience for me to learn about how a federal agency takes into account all of these things I've seen at the local and the state level to implement policy and to try to protect the coastal communities and coastal environments. And I am happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to come back, and I have to say I have one of those Beach Sisters bags that I use when I go to the grocery store. Very much appreciate them. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Amanda. Always great to hear everyone's career path, and we appreciate you sharing that. We got some great questions for you. So the first one I'm going to ask you is, let's see, it came in from Sarah. What was your toughest obstacle to overcome, both in the field and otherwise?
Oh, thanks, Sarah. That's a great question. So the biggest obstacle in the field is an easy one for me. So I had 4 different trips to Panama to conduct my field work, and both of the first 2 field trips, I didn't come back with any usable data. In some cases, the coral, the first time I went, the coral had the first time I went, I had trouble kind of finding a spot, just, you know, with my first field season, and I was learning a lot, and just that was kind of to be expected, and that was okay. And I just used that time to really plan for my next field season. And then when I returned the following field season with what I thought was a great plan, that nothing could go wrong. Of course, the site that I had planned to run my experiment, unfortunately, most of the corals had died, and it was essentially a graveyard. And so I wasn't able to run the experiment because everything had been planned on that location and there weren't enough corals to choose. But I thought on my feet quickly and came up with a new plan, took some of those corals to run a different experiment. And surprisingly, those corals wouldn't stress. And my experiment was to look at how they recovered from stress. And since they didn't stress in enough time that I was down there for my field season, I wasn't able to take away any data from that. So that's definitely the biggest obstacle of working in kind of a remote location. I then had to wait another year to get another opportunity to try again. But the last 2 field seasons worked. So you got to just keep trying, and eventually something will work out. And then in general, I think something that's really, really difficult, as I kind of talked about my journey, was I had told you I got really interested in corals during first grade. And so kind of transitioning to this marine debris was really interesting because the coral world was something I'd been really passionate and really excited about. And that hasn't changed. But I'm really excited to be learning about something new and gaining new skills. And I know that I have a good foundation in corals, and as my career path continues, there's definitely a lot of overlap between marine debris and corals, and so I have a lot of opportunities to look for in the future.
Great, thank you. And I would like to say that your experience with a couple of field seasons that didn't work out was a unique one, but I think that was a really good message, because often what you first try to do maybe doesn't work right away. So persistence, I like the message of persistence. Okay, so I'm going to combine 2. I think I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing anyone's name, but Kara asks, would you recommend Sea Semester to anyone in college interested in marine science? And Ingrid also asks what specific Sea Semester trip you went on. So if you could answer the 2 of those, please.
Yes, so Sea Semester, I was in C-235, and we sailed from Key West back to Hui, and we spent our time in the Gulf of Mexico. We were there 1 year after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So that's what our class was focused on, and all of us had different components. I will say my year was really unique because we were extremely small. The course was based on the oil spill, and so they recruited us in a much shorter time frame than the recruitment for a regular cycle, because this came up really quickly. And so there were only 7 of us in our cohort, which is like a third of what normal cohorts are. So I think that was a really interesting experience for us. We had a lot of people on the ship who we hadn't spent that time bonding with, but I really enjoyed it and would recommend it. I personally was seasick the entire time we were on the ship, which was a really big struggle. So definitely something to consider. But I still enjoyed it, and there's still something great of every day that I loved learning about, in addition to the very difficult pieces. And then I'm sorry, I might not have answered the first both parts. No,
I think you did. Would you recommend it, and what specific trip you went on? So I think you've got them both. I'm trying to decide if we have time. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one more, but you have to be quick. Okay. So Alida, and again, I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Do you have any advice for rising seniors on how to find colleges that offer marine biology field-based opportunities, and what college did you go to?
That's great. I went to Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, and it had a marine term, so it wasn't there's not a marine biology major. So I think your best bet is just finding some good sources on the internet, of looking at where some websites that give a list. That's what I did. I found a website and I just clicked on all of the links and researched what professors were working on that sounded interesting to me.
I would also just add, sorry to just jump in on that question to add to what Amanda said. I went to a school that did not have field-based opportunities, but I was able as my semester abroad to do a program at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. So even though it wasn't a program that my school offered, I could do it as a semester away. So you can also look at options like that. All right, thank you so much, Amanda. Lovely to hear your story. I'm going to ask you to hide your screen or turn off your camera, and I'm going to introduce Jenny. So let me ask Jenny to show her screen. So Jenny Rubin is in the Marine Chemistry and Geochemistry department here at WHOI. So she is a research specialist, and Jenny focuses on the effects of climate change on coastal environments. Now she's also my co-worker. She works at Woods Hole Sea Grant, and she is our research coordinator. So she gets to look at all of the different research proposals and help figure out what research might get funded. So I am going to turn it over to Jenny.
Awesome.
Turn my screen off.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen in a second, so hopefully that works. But I just wanted to say thank you to Grace for inviting me to participate in today's panel. This has been really really fascinating to hear everybody's stories, and it's really just wonderful to see the sort of diversity of journeys that people have taken to get where they are today, and it's very encouraging. So let's see, I'm just going to share my screen quickly so I can share my pathway. So hopefully you guys can see this picture, I hope, or my screen.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Right, so this is a picture of me when I was in high school. I think I am probably about the same age as many of the students on the line here today. But I grew up in Central Virginia in Charlottesville, which is a little college town where the University of Virginia is located. Where I grew up, I was, you know, I guess I was closer than Amanda to the coast, but there's certainly no ocean close to where I grew up, and really my sort of exposure to the ocean was, you know, taking family vacations to the beach, you know, going on fishing trips with my dad. You know, I was fortunate, my dad really loves fishing, and I got to go on some of those. That picture of me in high school is holding a redfish. I think that might have been in South Carolina, but really I didn't have any exposure whatsoever to marine science growing up. However, when I was younger, and to this day, I always sort of had an affinity for math and science. I really just always was very good at math, and I always really loved math. And I feel very fortunate because, you know, my parents were very supportive of me, and sort of I didn't succumb to any sort of societal pressures that many girls feel who are or express interest in math and sciences. And I was able to, you know, continue learning a lot about math and sort of pursue my interests in math and science, and I was very lucky in that regard. I did an undergraduate degree at the University of Virginia, which is located in Charlottesville, my hometown. In fact, I didn't leave my hometown until I moved up to Woods Hole in 2013. So I spent a lot of time in Charlottesville before coming up here, and that definitely shaped some of my views. But you know, when I was in college, I really didn't know really at all what I wanted to do. I mentioned I was always sort of interested in math and science, and so I always kind of kept taking math classes and science classes, but I really had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. I took all sorts of classes across the board from sciences: anthropology, archaeology, astronomy, you know, environmental sciences, biology, ecology, chemistry. You know, I kind of took everything. And I really had no idea, you know, what I wanted to do, although I did know that I was less interested in the humanities. But when I was a junior in college, I had to declare a major. And when I sort of sat down to look at all the things that all the classes I had taken and what I wanted to go to sort of declare my major as, I realized I had taken most of the math classes that I needed to declare a math major, as well as a lot of the science courses I needed for a biology major. And so, you know, I declared a math and science double major, but I still hadn't discovered that marine science was a thing until the sort of winter of my junior year in college. I took a field course, which seems sort of similar seems like a similar theme for many of the panelists tonight, that we had a field experience that really shaped what we wanted to do. But this field class that I took was probably not that different from sort of the Immersive Girls in Science program, where the course was 10 days focused on the Chesapeake Bay, which represents a very large portion of Virginia's coastline. And the theme of the class was sort of learning about the challenges that the Chesapeake Bay faces, and the problems that we are doing, people are doing, and things that we're doing to sort of degrade the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And as part of this class, you know, we drove around the Chesapeake Bay watershed and learned all about, you know, how farmers in Pennsylvania are influencing and affecting fishermen in southeastern Virginia, which I just thought was absolutely fascinating. But as part of this class, we got to sort of comment on and contribute on a research project that was going on at the time, which was this social natural science research experiment that was designed around building something called the UVA Bay game, which was a computer game that was designed as an educational tool to where people in classrooms or large groups of people would play this game, and the players of this game would be representing different stakeholder groups within the Chesapeake Bay. So some people would be farmers, some people would be homeowners, some people would be fishermen or crabbers or aquaculturists or coastal managers. And the goal of the game was to sort of have everybody do as best as they can for their livelihood, but also perhaps to see the Chesapeake Bay be as healthy as possible. And one of the sort of experiences that I had coming out of this was that, you know, you would get a whole bunch of people around in a room making decisions about how to run their virtual lives in this game. And it was really hard for everybody to do well and for the Chesapeake Bay to be healthy. Because there are a lot of problems and a lot of decisions involved in influencing sort of the chemistry and the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And to me, I saw this experience, which was basically the intersection between my interest in math and my interest in science. And I said, oh my gosh, this could be a career field. I could work on these mathematical modeling tools and on these amazing field projects, and, you know, get to do what I love and find something that I was passionate about. And so after I took this field course and sort of discovered this interface between math and sciences, I got an internship working with a graduate student in the environmental sciences department at the University of Virginia, where I got to spend a couple of summers working on coral reefs in the Florida Keys. And I just knew that sold the experience for me afterwards. And so I stayed working in the same lab group for a master's degree, where my work focused on the effects of seagrass restoration on sort of the health and chemistry of Virginia's coastal bays. I graduated from University of Virginia with my master's degree in 2013, where I came up to WHOI, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, with my husband. At the time was my partner. He had just gotten a postdoc, and I was hired on to work with a group called the Computational Biogeochemistry Group, which is a bit of a mouthful. But the goal of that group was to sort of look at research questions related to climate change and how climate change affects the chemistry of our oceans and sort of the conditions in our oceans, and then also to think about how sort of those changes might affect people. And then about a year and a half ago, as Grace mentioned, I was hired I hired part-time with Woods Hole Sea Grant as research coordinator. So that's and that's where I am today. So that's kind of my journey. I'll talk a little bit about what I do for my job. So as I mentioned, and as Grace mentioned, I'm a research specialist in the Department of Marine Chemistry and Geochemistry, and I am also the research coordinator for Woods Hole Sea Grant. So I wear two hats with my career and my job. So for Woods Hole Sea Grant as research coordinator, my role is to help facilitate funding researchers to answer important research questions on that are associated with challenges faced by coastal communities. And so as part of that, I help to facilitate sort of requests for proposals. I seek proposals from researchers around the state of Massachusetts. I helped sort of put together review panels for those proposals. And then we fund researchers here in Massachusetts. And it's really interesting. I'll talk a little bit about what I do for with my research hat on, but it's really neat for me because I have my own research interests, and I pursue those with part of my time, but the other part of my time is helping to facilitate other people's research. And I think it's really fascinating and really wonderful because I get to learn a lot about what I do, of course, through my own research and answer research questions that I'm especially interested in. But through my role as research coordinator, I also get to help, facilitate other people's research that is equally as important, but may not be in my area of expertise. So I'll talk a little bit about the research that I do. My research, as with my research specialist hat on, sort of lies at the interface between what people are doing to our coastlines and to our environment, and then in turn how those changes, those environmental changes, then affect us, turn around to affect us. So I work a lot on climate change and using sort of mathematical and computational tools to answer research questions such as how might climate change influence fisheries distribution. So this movie you're looking at is just showing where you can find lobsters, which is an incredibly important fishing industry for the New England region, and has been changing dramatically over the last couple of decades related to climate change. I'm also very interested in sort of what we're doing more locally, thinking about ocean acidification and how our what we do in our everyday lives is affecting sort of the chemistry and the pH of our ocean. So I spend a lot of time in the lab working with sort of complicated looking instruments, thinking about how our ocean chemistry can influence important sort of shellfish species like oysters and clams and scallops. I also look at more local challenges. This was a picture of me doing some field work. We were trying to answer some questions related to wastewater discharge, so how wastewater discharge influences the chemistry of our coastal oceans. Finally, I've also gotten the opportunity to do some really fun field work in much more exotic places, like in the Florida Keys and in Bermuda, thinking about how local chemistry in those places is influencing the health of coral reefs. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll be happy to answer anybody's questions.
Great, and we have a couple of questions. Thank you for sharing your story. I always learn something new about everybody when they tell their story, so I very much appreciate that. And thank you for sharing your personal experiences. So we have a couple of questions. So Abby asks, do you recommend double majoring, and how has being a math major helped you with your job?
So I think certainly double majoring was a great experience for me because I had interest in multiple fields. I also found that I had also sort of conveniently taken enough courses so that it was not a terrible challenge to do a double major. But it allowed me to focus on multiple topics and sort of get multiple degrees. And I felt like it was a very helpful experience to really be able to focus on those two topics. Can you repeat the second question? I apologize.
Oh, it was just, do you recommend double majoring, and how has being a math major helped you in your job?
Yes, of course. And so this comment was brought up earlier, but part of what I do, actually a lot of what I do is seemingly similar to other panelists. We spend a lot of time in front of the computer. And so a lot of what I do is really computational sciences. And so as part of my math major, we also had to take a course in computer science. And so I learned a lot through that course on sort of how to sort of do data analysis, how to use computers as resources, and how to think about computers in a little bit of a different way, and really be able to utilize sort of data analysis as a tool for science.
Great. And Bailey wants to know, so do you have any advice for someone who's interested in a STEM career, like you said, but isn't yet sure what field they want to pursue? So what advice would you give to her?
So I think this is, again, a common theme, but the advice I would give is, take as many classes in as many topics as you think might be interesting. So like I said, in my own career, I took courses in probably every science class you can think of. I knew I was interested in sciences, but it took me a very long time to realize exactly what it was that I was interested about sciences. And so the advice I would give is really just get exposure to as many different fields as you can until you find something that you are absolutely passionate about.
And I'm going to open it up to the panel in just a second, but this just came in from Sophie. Would you recommend taking statistics or calculus then in your senior year of high school to pursue a career in marine science?
Yes, I think that would be very helpful. I think having that background, the statistics background, and the calculus background will go a long way for you to sort of give you a leg up in more sort of complex data analyses that might be part of your career going forward.
And I would add to what Jenny said, if you don't take statistics in high school, my guess if you're marine biology majors, you'll end up taking it in either undergrad or grad school if you go. I can think about the stats classes.
I would second that too. You probably are going to have to take it anyway, would be my guess. And if you have a little exposure to it to begin with, you might be
Yes.
better prepared.
Yes. So thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing your experience. I'm going to ask everybody to, all of our panelists to come back at this point. I have some questions that I saved. One person specifically asked me to ask it of the panel, but also if you have questions of the panel, please write it. I'm still monitoring the chat. But the question that I'd like to ask of everyone, and I'm just going to make sure everybody's back. Excellent. So one of the questions, let's see. Sophie asked, and I think this has already been answered, but I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to answer it. Are there any opportunities for an early high school student who's very interested in oceanography and would like to discover more about the ocean and the ecosystem at either WHOI or STEM? Are there high school opportunities that you maybe participated in or would recommend? So I think that's specifically if you know of any, maybe in Massachusetts, it sounds like. Go.
So I would recommend, if you are in Massachusetts, there's a lot of universities. So WHOI is definitely a great one, but just look and see what research is going on in the area, and just feel free to email the professor and see if they have an opportunity for you to join them to do research or to do lab work. But I think when you do that, it's good to ask questions of, have they had students in the past, and what is the framework for how students work? A lot of times you'll be limited if you are in high school, depending on your age. If you're 18 or not, there might be different limitations, and you want to make sure you're getting into a situation where this is going to be a mentorship opportunity, where the person is going to be giving you the opportunity. You're not just doing work. But I don't know what anyone else has to add.
Hey, Grace, does the Woods Hole Science School have, they have camps in the summer, but I don't know what grades they go up to. Are you familiar with that?
I am, and I don't think that they go up through the high school. But there are some programs. So if you're in the Woods Hole area, there are some programs at WHOI Bay that are for high school aged students. I also would encourage you to think about our 2021 Girls in Science program. So even though it didn't happen this year, next year we are hoping to be fielding 2 seasons, so 2 weeks. I'm going to second what Amanda said as well in looking at opportunities. Often if you just send an email to see if you can work with someone, and especially if you can also use it for your science fair project. If you're interested in doing a science fair project, it can do both, and it's a good way to try something out. And you might love it, or you might decide that it was good you tried it out because it's not something you want to pursue. Any other suggestions? Sarai, do you have any ideas in the Boston area? No?
Not any I can think of right now.
Okay, If anyone thinks of any,
They do come up, so I would just say like doing some research, you know, online. Sometimes you can find something.
yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question then. So Anna asks this question: how do you recommend finding a good mentor?
That is a very tough question. I would say, so if you are comfortable emailing people, I would recommend, you know, doing some research at your, you know, looking online, doing some research, looking for people who work in marine sciences at a university that's near you, and reach out to that person, see if they are interested in becoming a mentor. But I would also reach out to their lab and reach out to members of their lab, their graduate students in particular, and really talk to people who work with that PI or that scientist, and hear from the graduate students about what they think, if that person is a good mentor.
Anybody else have suggestions?
I would just add that I think women, especially when we're young, we're not really good at asking. So, you know, when Jenny was like, if you feel comfortable reaching out, just be brave, be courageous. The worst that could happen is, no, I don't have time, or, you know, you might get a referral, but just be relentless, reach out. You know, I mentioned that in my talk, to just start connecting with people. You don't know where it's going to lead. And someone's going to see your courage and your ambition, and they're going to want you around and see and lift you up. So just be brave, reach out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, even if someone may not be available for mentorship, just sitting down and getting coffee with them and, you know, hearing their story and see what recommendations they might have can always be useful.
Yeah, and I would just add, I know Kerry touched on this, but if you're not comfortable, because I know that when I was in high school, I did not have the confidence to just send an email to folks. If you have a teacher, even if they're not your science teacher, but if you have someone that you connect with, maybe it's one of your teachers or a guidance counselor, or even another adult in your life that you really connect with, ask them for help, because they might be able to you know, help you send the email or just work with you on it and really be there for you. And I find that that makes things a little bit easier. So if you have someone, again, maybe at your school, it doesn't even have to be your science teacher, they can help you to reach out and just get that confidence to send that first email and really help you out that way. And the other thing I would recommend is you can try volunteering too. That's a nice way to make the connections Kerry's talking about. And it might just be you volunteer for a day, or you might, you know, be able, if you have the time, you might be able to volunteer a couple of hours, maybe once a week, and you just never know where that's going to go. And a lot of places that maybe don't have money to do a full program might need your help for a couple hours, and you can get a chance to try something out and also meet some folks. And then they might connect you with someone else if they see you do a really good job. So it helps to make connections sometimes, to just, you know, see if there's a place you can volunteer. And often libraries or different organizations in your town might have all those opportunities listed. Were you going to say something, Amanda? Did I cut you off?
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to also suggest looking on social media for opportunities. A lot of people who post on social media are really open. Those people are also probably really busy and get a lot of requests, but they might be able to point you in the direction. But I think that's also just helpful to look at what other people are doing as well.
Yes. And just so everyone knows, well, I should clear this with the panel, but I'll be sending out our emails afterwards. So if you have any questions of the panelists, you can email. You are now part of our network, so we encourage you to email us with any questions that you might have, or you know, if you need help sending that email, feel free to send us an email. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions. Let's see. This is from Natalia. When pursuing a marine science career, what skills do you think it's the most useful to have? So let's go around and each person tell me what they think the top skill that they have. What's the top skill you think you use the most in your career? And I'm going to go just in the order that I see you all. So Jenny, you're first.
I would say computer science skills has been probably the thing I used the most in my career.
Okay, thank you. Computer science, Sayigh, you're next.
I guess I would second that. Definitely a lot of just different opportunities. I found like those skills are useful. But I would say also just like making sure you're really passionate about the work that you're doing, because a lot of skills are teachable and you can learn those, but really making sure that the work you want to do is meaningful and worth it.
Love what you do. I love that message. Kerry?
I will just tell you what I observe from working with hundreds of scientists. The best, most successful scientists that I've seen ask a lot of questions. They are hungry. I mean, that must be what makes a great scientist, because even the senior ones that you would think have all the answers are just the most inquisitive. I'm really impressed by their humility that late in their career, but ask questions.
Never stop asking them.
Never stop asking questions.
That's good advice. Laela, you're next.
Yeah, I think those are all great things that have been said so far. I agree about loving what you do and being curious about what you do. I guess thinking more from like a skill perspective, one thing that hasn't come up is writing. That's something I spend a lot of time doing, and I spend a lot of time teaching. And so I think, you know, that's the currency of science, and so learning how to write, and that comes from reading a lot too, I think. So I really value that skill.
Great, right, that is a good skill. I can't tell you how many students have questioned me, and I'm like, you'll have to be able to communicate in a written word to communicate your science. So that's a good one. And Amanda?
Yes, those are all really good. I would add on critical thinking and flexibility. Being able to really look at a problem and think about how you got there, or how the problem came to be, and then what are the possible opportunities, both of how you want to approach solving it, and then what are you going to do when it goes wrong? How are you still going to figure it out?
Great. All good answers. And I don't know, some of you have already answered this, but the question that I like to ask the most, so this is a question from Grace, I'll tell you, is if you could tell your high school self one thing right now, what would that one thing be? Gary?
What I find the older and older I get, I wish I trusted my voice, my thoughts more. Like if I came up with an idea, I'd be like, oh no, they're gonna laugh or whatever. But what I found with sitting in the room, and I think Sayigh said that earlier, you know, the men would say all these ideas. I'm like, oh my God, I had that idea. So it took years of hearing my idea being voiced eventually. And then I kind of, now I'm like, if I'm in meetings, I put it out there, whether it's good or not, but I trust myself a lot more now than I did back then. And I wish I had done that.
Great. Anybody else willing to talk to their high school self?
I think for me, it would probably be like be true to yourself and be yourself, and don't be afraid to like bring your full self into places, even though it doesn't seem like it's always, you know, welcome, but you're there and you belong.
Nice. I think Amanda, you were going to come next.
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to tell myself this, but listening a little better each step of the way. But just that, you know, there's not one right next step, or there's not one right path. I think that was something I was really nervous about. Like, I have to pick the right college because there's only one. I have to pick the right grad school opportunity because there's only one that's right. And there's going to be good things about everything, and there's going to be negatives about everything. And once you make your decision, just be excited about it, and it's going to be okay.
I have to say, I hope that's one of the messages that everybody got from this whole panel. It's one that we always try to make sure during the Girls in Science Week that the fellows really embrace, that there's not one linear path, that you can take all sorts of routes, just like you said, Amanda, and they're not necessarily right or wrong. And to not be afraid to have to go left to go right and get to where you want to go. So that's good advice. Anybody else before I move on?
Yeah, I would add to also kind of along the same lines as what Kerry said, but to be confident in yourself and, you know, be confident that you know, I mean, assuming you've studied everything, you know what you're talking about and you know exactly what you are trying to say. And I know, I mean, I'm still telling myself this every day, that I think we suffer a lot from feeling not confident in what we know. And so I would just tell myself to trust that and be more confident.
Excellent. All right. I know we're pushing 8 o'clock, but I'm going to do one more question because I'm always eager for more. As long as you all are okay. Are you okay to stay?
Of course.
Great. So let's see. This question comes from Jessica. She sent me some questions ahead of time. So extra credit for sending me questions before the webinar started. So she was asking, like, how consistent is your workload? And I know this is different for everybody, but just really quickly, because we've heard about all the different careers that you have, how consistent is your workload? And, you know, do you do a lot of field work? Is there a lot of relocation in your job? So I think that's worth each person just sort of saying what it's like for them. So I'm going to go in reverse order this time, the way I can see you all. So we'll start with Amanda and end with Jenny.
Yeah, that was something that kind of, another reason that informed how I decided to do the fellowship was during grad school, it was a lot of traveling to Panama for long periods of time to do my research. And so I was interested in having something that was a little more consistent, even though I loved the opportunity to travel. And so now my work is pretty consistent of doing things on the computer. What varies day to day or how many deadlines there are still varies day to day. But I'm sitting in my office doing the work on the computer now.
Thank you. Laela, you're next.
Yeah, I guess I would also say that my workload varies a lot depending on what is happening with, you know, semester schedules and research schedules, and my fieldwork schedules also vary a huge amount depending on funding. So I have to apply for funds for projects, and if I get funding, I do fieldwork. If I don't, I don't. So it's really, really variable. I would have a really hard time trying to describe a typical day, but that's also kind of fun because it sort of keeps you on your toes.
Thank you. Kerry?
Yeah, for me, it's up and down quite a bit, but I can say there are a few meetings that I have that are on location throughout the year that, you know, when you're away, like when you guys go out to sea, you know, you're not getting as much done because you're basically out of the office. So I find that, you know, I'm preparing for that meeting, I get back and I have a zillion emails, and then it's like that. And then in the summers, which I will extend to the ladies listening, I do a lot of outreach at WHOI. So myself and a couple of people in the port office will do ship tours. And that takes up an awful lot of my time, but it's one of my favorite things about my job is I get to meet different people and kind of share all the awesome stuff we're doing here. So summers are busy, but I welcome you. Come visit for a tour.
Thank you. Laela? Not Laela, I'm sorry, Sayigh.
Yeah.
I was going the wrong direction. She's on the other side, Kerry.
I would say at Earthwatch, I had the opportunity to travel and be in the field quite a bit. And so in that position, it was definitely, you know, there would be times where I was in the field, but the majority of the time I would be at the office and behind my computer. Now in grad school, I'm definitely not going to be traveling as much or in the field as much.
And your workload, was it pretty consistent, or was it similar to?
Yeah, it would depend on the program. I mean, I would say always busy, but sometimes busier.
Yeah. And Girls in Science was pretty busy, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yes, it was.
Thank you. Next is Jenny.
Yeah, so my workload also varies. I do, since I took, so about, like I said, about a year and a half ago, I started with Woods Hole Sea Grant, and that sort of really changed my workload a lot. So I was full-time research before I started with Woods Hole Sea Grant, and now I'm basically half-time research and half-time program management. And so that really sort of shifted what I did and my day-to-day activities from a lot of sort of lab work and data analysis to sort of less often that, but also a lot of sort of program management type computer activities. But in terms of travel, you know, it also really varies. It depends on what types of field work I'm doing. A lot of the work that I do is local here on Cape Cod or in Massachusetts. And so most of my work is, I don't have to travel too far to do in terms of field work, although I have done some work going to, like I mentioned, some more exotic places where, you know, you're 3 weeks in the field and every hour of every day is packed with activities trying to get as much done as possible. So highly variable also.
Excellent. Well, I could talk to you ladies all day. I have to say, I could keep going, and the insights you've given are just really, really, really amazing. I wish my high school self had been able to hear everything that you had to share. I think it would have helped a lot. But our time is up, and I don't want to keep people too long. But there are a couple of things I do before anybody signs off. A couple of things I do want to just share with you. I will be sending an email out to anyone who registered for the webinar. And it will have the answer to any of the questions that you wrote in the chat box. Or Jessica, I know you sent me a few more questions ahead of time. We'll put those answers there. We'll email them out. If you're watching a recording of this, we are going to also post that with the recording on the Woods Hole Sea Grant Girls in Science page. So you'll find a link to, well, if you're already watching this, you've already found the link, but you'll be able to read all of the answers to those questions that we didn't get a chance to ask. So my second thing I was going to say is it is recorded. So I'm going to just share my screen really quickly just to show you the Girls in Science page. So let me do that really quick. Okay. Does everybody see? So this is the Girls in Science page, and this is our team from last year. And so those of you that are interested in applying to the 2021 Girls in Science program, you'll find information here. There's some videos you can watch. But I also just wanted to show you this because this is where we'll post the recording and the answers to those questions. So you can find information here. I'm also going to make sure that everybody gets the email addresses for our presenters so that you can email us. Certainly, if you want to email me about anything, I've seen some questions about, you know, what if I can't find information? We are here. You're part of our team now, so I feel confident saying this for everyone. Any questions, if you want to reach out to us, it's not a cold email because you've already met us. So feel free to email us and just say I was on the Women in STEM webinar, and we'll know exactly who you are and answer any questions you have. So please don't be afraid to follow up and ask us any questions that you might have. And I also just want to say thank you to all of the panelists. It was really a pleasure to hear all of your stories. Even though some of you talked last year, I always learned something new and gained new insights, and it's just wonderful. I would say my advice to all of you too, and this is part of the Girls in Science program, is the power of sharing your story. So everyone here just shared their story, but you have power as well to share, and I'm speaking to you, the viewers, you have the power to share your journey and your story, and others will learn from you. So I think I would welcome you to do that. And if you want to email us and share it with us, I would love to hear from anybody. So you can find my email. I'm Grace Simpkins. You can find it on that Girls in Science website, but you'll be getting all of our emails when I send it out. Did I miss anything to all of asking all of my panelists? Did I miss anything? Oh, also we'll be translating into Spanish. So So if you're a Spanish speaker or no Spanish speakers, look for the Spanish subtitles. Sorry, did I cut you off?
I just said, great job, Grace. You're so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Thank you,
have a
Grace.
great, thank you. Have a great night, and I look forward to, if you want to follow up with Sayigh, I look forward to hearing about grad school. I look forward to hearing about Laela teaching this. I look forward to hearing about Amanda's fellowship and just everything, what Kerry's doing with her ships during COVID, what Jenny's able to do in the lab if she's going in the lab. So feel free to follow up with what we're doing in the fall as well. All right, I'll see you all later. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.